What you see in front of you are most of the components that would be fitted to a 1960 John Deere 2-cylinder 430 tractor equipped with power steering. If you watched any of my previous videos on my little 430 standard restoration project, I've probably mentioned that it's had factory power steering a time or two. And this video, or series of videos, is going to document how we cleaned everything up and got it looking to where you see it here. Rather than have one long mega video, I'm probably going to break it down into chapters. We'll talk about the flow divider, the pedestal, and maybe the pump in their own separate sections, so it's not to lose your interest. There'll probably be a little repetition at the beginning, kind of covering power steering system, how it all fits together, but a little redundancy is a small price to pay for a shorter video, I suppose. So what you see is everything we've got here at the end. Now we're going to jump back in time, start at the beginning, and see what it took to get here. I've gone ahead and laid out the power steering components we pulled from our little John Deere 430 2-cylinder tractor. If you had a 420, 430, 440 Dubuque tractor from roughly 1958 through 1960, equipped with factory power steering, these are a lot of the similar components, if not the components, you would have had on your machine. There is a horizontal steering shaft. Steering wheel ties in over here. Comes down, meshes with a flow divider valve. It's a little coupling and pin that connect those. Those have a tendency to get a lot of wear. This front coupling, you can kind of see a lot of wiggle there, so it's an area we're going to have to address. Flow divider mounts via some bracketing, essentially just ahead of and above the cylinder head. This base bracket here mounts on the engine block just in front of the cylinder head. Additional bracketing helps to support the power steering pump in addition to the upper radiator mounts. There's usually little mounting pads in this part here that I've already removed just because they're garbage. But additional brackets for the upper radiator mount, power steering pump mount. In this case, this one fits through the hole, pulley on the other side. This front coupler meshes up here with this little steering box on the top. There is a horizontal steering worm in here that meshes with a vertical steering shaft that comes all the way down, ties in with our little wishbone that connects to our tie rods down on our axle. System works by the pump spinning, generating pressure. Pressure from the pump goes up to the flow divider. Depending on where you've turned your steering wheel, that pressure is directed through hydraulic lines to our cylinder up on the steering pedestal. There's a piston in here that moves back and forth with hydraulic pressure. There's a little piston rod that connects to what I'm going to call a rack. It's like a flat panel with teeth that meshes with a gear on this steering shaft up on the inside. You'll see all those parts once we dig in and take all this apart, but when pressure is applied, pushing the piston one way or the other, essentially it turns the steering shaft one way or the other. And that is what provides the extra assist in the power part of the power steering. These brackets are from the later version of a power steering setup. Earlier John Deere 430 tractors and all the 420 tractors equipped with power steering pumps dedicated to the unit had a pump that looks like this, which has the reservoir on top of the pump versus surrounding, I guess, the mechanicals of the pump. Same function on the bracketing in that it supports the radiator as well as the pump. You can see that this bracket's a little different than this one in its make. 420 used a similar bracket just to make things interesting. 420 bracket, that's essentially what this one here is. The pump mounts just in these two holes behind the pulley. But on a 420 tractor, if you look side by side, you'll notice that these tangs that mount the sheet metal are more vertical, where on the 430, they have a bit of a slant to them. And that's just to accommodate the different types of sheet metal that your tractor had. So 430 stuff doesn't necessarily always work on a 420. You can mount all these components on the tractor, but your sheet metal is not going to line up. 440, because it had different sheet metal altogether, that didn't matter. These pieces in here, they don't even have the little tangs in there where the fasteners connect in. So that's probably what this bracket came from, was a 440 tractor. So there's a little quick lesson in power steering parts. So chapter 1 of our power steering rebuild is going to cover our flow divider valve. We're going to see what it takes to take our flow divider from looking like this to looking like this. Clean and shiny. The flow divider's job is to take pressured oil in through this port here, which, needless to say, needs some help. Pressure oil goes in there. There are two lines that go off to the rack and pinion cylinder on the steering pedestal. I simply loop this line together when I pull it apart just to keep everything from flopping around. Then there's a low pressure return port that returns oil back to the power steering pump or power steering fluid. When the steering shaft turns, all those mysterious and delicate hydraulic-y bits inside the valve direct the oil one way or the other to help that rack and pinion make it easier for you to turn the tractor. Typically, the power port, pressure port, faces the front of the tractor. I know that because when I took it apart, there's the bracket that holds the front end, and these bolts are still loose where I took that off. Also, the top is a little cleaner than the bottom where all the oil tends to run down. So I know that's the front, that's the back. That'll be important when we get to the inside stuff as we're taking it apart. First thing we got to do is pound out these little studs or these little pins that are in the shaft. These are a fairly hard material. They get some wear to them. They get a little stubborn when it comes to getting them out. So I'm going to go set this up in the vise, get a hammer, and pound these out so then we can take our caps off each end and then take a peek on the inside. So again, these pins are a fairly hard material and take a little bit of a beating to get out of there, but mission accomplished. So somewhere along the way, the original video footage of the disassembly of our flow divider was lost, at least the component we're about to go over here. Luckily, I have replacements, and what we are going to do is recreate the excitement that was the disassembly of this valve by starting with the removal of these 3 7/16 head bolts that will allow us to pull a cap off the end of our valve housing here. With those bolts off the valve, our cap should be loose, and there's going to be 2 O-rings kind of incorporated into with this cap. One is going to sort of be in this little recess, and it's going to go over the shaft. The other is a bigger, it kind of presses up against the housing itself. Both those try to keep all the oil inside. They do okay for a while, but those O-rings do wear out, and these things will leak often. So that's one of the weak spots of this power steering system when it comes to leaks and things. You can take the other cap off, but for our purposes, we can just slide our entire valve system out there. That's the O-ring from the other cap on the other side. To start the disassembly of the two shafts, there is a pin that holds the forward shaft into the rest of the valve. We can simply, one way or the other, push that pin out, and that will allow that pin to come out of the sleeve and the valve body. I've cleaned up a couple of parts of our flow divider, but before I get too far, I think I'd like to come back to the spool, valve, and sleeve assembly and separate these. The spool valve will pull out of the sleeve. There are a couple of springs and little detent balls holding tension that hold the two together. I've had some. You can just pull them apart by hand. This one's a little more rigid, so I'm going to take a little hammer and give a tap on the back with a punch. Make sure that you kind of use a rag around this end here to keep everything in order, because without that, you push these two apart, the tension will release on the springs, balls go flying, springs go flying. Then you have to do a search and rescue mission in the shop. So just like that, that ball is on that spring, held in place. I'm sure it's the same on the other end. So that's one set. There's another set that's offset 90 degrees. Got a little spring out of there. And you can see if, can I get that? There we go, just by hand. The rest of the way. And we have our second spring, second set of balls, all captured nice and snug in our rag. We will go ahead and give all this a wash in a solvent bath to get the rest of the debris that's still stuck in these grooves and all these little slots cleaned out. And then I think we'll be ready to go. We'll get some new O-rings, kind of throw things back together. Reassembling our flow divider involves replacing a couple O-rings. There's one in this little recess between our valve assemblies here, so we'll replace him. In our original design, our end caps, there are two O-rings. There's one that goes in this groove here, and one that fits in this groove here. This is the 430 style. What I'm going to do with this tractor is, back in the day, I was able to source up a set of caps from a 1010 tractor, T18527. They're a little different. They've got the same groove here, but no groove there. Instead, the O-ring groove is up inside here, and there's a little recess for a seal. These were designed a little bit better in the 1010 series. You've got your seal and your O-ring compared to nothing on the outside, because these things would really leak once those O-rings wear out, which didn't take long. So I'm going to do a little update on this one. Now the O-ring on this is the easy part, because the next part involves installing our valve with the spring and little check balls that go in here. It's got in a little baggie here. The spring. So there's a staggering that goes on. There's a recess, a hole, a hole. So we're going to put our spring in first. And there's a ball that goes in. Try and do this so you can see it. A ball on each end of the spring. And that is the tricky part, is getting them to cooperate. Squeeze and push. Okay, there's one. Now we gotta do the second set. Spring. And I might put a little bit of, just a touch of lube on our O-ring in here. Should be sufficient. All right, spring, ball, ball, push. Now we got to get our piece over our O-ring there in the back. There we go. Now, whatever you do, don't pull those apart, because you'll have balls and springs flying everywhere. Don't ask me how I know. A little side note, when you're installing your two components of your valve together, there's an opening here on the bottom that needs to line up with this hole here. You can easily turn it 90 degrees if you're putting your ball dents in with the proper holes. I did that the first time, so I had to go back and reposition it, but a little retrospective information. Hole has to line up with that hole. And that's the case. We can take our shaft, insert him there, pin, holds him in place. And then this guy fits into our cast housing. There is a directionality to this. This one here is another takeoff that I've got. I can kind of wiggle that end around. This one's solid. So this end being wiggly tells me that it's probably that shaft there. Just like that. Now with our valve and our housing, we can go ahead and pop one of the caps on the end here. Actually, we can put both caps on. Get one of our O-rings that's supposed to fit in our cap set in place. Do a little stick them, try and hold them in there. Now, going over the end of the shaft is going to be a little snug with the seal and the O-ring. Try and lube them up a little bit just to make it a little easier going on. Be careful there's no burrs on the end where that pin goes through. Sometimes I find if I do a little twist, helps it pop through. Just line up our holes in there. And we're not going to tighten these because that bracket is eventually going to go on the front. But just a gentle little snugging up. This is mostly just to keep our cap and O-ring sort of in place. Not overly tight. So now we get to do our other side. To do that, you're going to put in an O-ring. This is actually the same O-ring that would be used in the old style, set right in there. But as we talked about before, it fits up in that groove. And it's kind of a snug fit up in there. You wouldn't think it's meant to go in there, but it does. There we are. Then we've got our seal. This is a AT6690. Very nice. Cleanliness is very important in this whole process. Get our O-ring. Again, make sure we've not got too many burrs up on there. Just like that. Now these bolts we can go ahead and snug up, because this is the side that does not have the bracket on it. Now these are smaller bolts, so we don't go too crazy getting too tight. All right. From there, we have our more or less rebuilt flow divider valve. So for the time being, I'm going to take a piece of tape, keep the insides clean as best we can. One last observation I want to make on our flow divider as we rebuild it. As you may know, we put 1010 end caps on our valve. And comparing the 1010 caps to the 430 caps on this 430 flow divider, you'll notice that the nose of this cap sticks out maybe a quarter inch or so more on each end than our original does. And what I don't know is that when our little shavs mount on there, if we're going to have enough room to compensate for that. At least on the forward part, I think we do, because in the original, I don't know if you can see, the wear point where our little pin goes in there is pretty close to the end, so we've got some room to move forward. So if our original's there and we move that distance there, I think we can work around it. We'll have to see if there's some play, some adjustment on the other side as well, even if it involves grinding down our coupling a little bit. I think we can make it work. So be aware of that. If you try the same upgrade, just remember I told you so. Little disclaimer. And with that, I think we're going to call the flow divider done. So next we can move on to chapter 2, the pump, the pedestal. We'll see what we get into next. Come back for that.